never thought I'd be the one holding the deed to my childhood home, especially not after my parents sold my inheritance, my grandmother's vintage jewelry collection worth over $300,000, to fund my younger sister's extravagant wedding. The look on their faces when I revealed I owned their mortgage during that fateful Sunday dinner still haunts me sometimes. But perhaps I should start from the beginning. My name is Olivia Reed. I grew up in Mapleton, a picturesque suburban town, with tree-lined streets and perfectly manicured lawns. From the outside, the Reed family appeared perfect. My father Thomas was a respected high school principal. My mother Eleanor ran a successful interior design business, and my sister Cassandra was the golden child who excelled at everything she touched. Then there was me. Practical, hardworking, and perpetually overlooked. Our family dynamic wasn't always so unbalanced. When I was younger, I remember warm family gatherings, my father teaching me how to ride a bike and my mother braiding my hair before school. But something shifted when Cassandra entered high school. Suddenly, every conversation centered around her achievements, her perfect grades, her position as cheer captain, her acceptance to prestigious colleges. My own accomplishments, graduating top of my class in accounting, securing internships at respected firms, were mentioned only in passing, if at all. Olivia, can you help set the table? We're celebrating Cassandra's debate team victory tonight, my mother would call out as I studied for my finance exams. Olivia, we need to cancel our weekend plans. Cassandra has a last-minute college interview we need to drive her to, my father would announce, despite having promised to help me move into my first apartment. I told myself it didn't matter. I focused on building my own life, putting myself through university with scholarships and part-time jobs, while my parents drained their savings for Cassandra's education at an elite private university. I graduated with honors, secured a position at a top financial firm, and steadily climbed the corporate ladder. By 28, I was making six figures as an investment advisor, specializing in real estate investments and mortgage-backed securities. My clients valued my advice, even if my family rarely asked for it. The one person who always saw me was my grandmother, Evelyn. My mother's mother lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a garden she tended with loving care. Every Sunday, I would visit her for tea, helping with household tasks and listening to stories about her life. She had been widowed young and built a successful jewelry business on her own, a rarity for women of her generation. You remind me of myself, Olivia, she would say, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You've got that same determination, that same fire. When I confided in her about feeling invisible in my own family, she would take my hand in hers, her skin paper-thin, but her grip surprisingly strong. They'll see you one day, dear. And if they don't, it's their loss. You keep building your life, brick by brick. That's how you create something that lasts. On my 30th birthday, while my parents were attending one of Cassandra's art exhibits in New York, grandmother Evelyn invited me to her cottage. There, she presented me with a worn wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. This collection took me a lifetime to build, she said, opening the box to reveal stunning vintage pieces, art deco necklaces, Victorian brooches, emerald earrings that caught the light. Each piece has a story, just like each of us. I want you to have them, Olivia, I protested, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gift. These pieces were not only beautiful but valuable. I estimated the collection was worth well over $300,000. I've already updated my will, she insisted. The jewelry goes to you. The house and remaining assets will be divided equally between you and Cassandra. I know you'll treasure these pieces the way I have. 3 months later, grandmother Evelyn passed peacefully in her sleep. The loss hit me like a physical blow. At the funeral, I stood stoically beside my parents and sister, accepting condolences from people who often spoke about what a remarkable woman Evelyn had been. I noticed several glances toward my mother when people mentioned Evelyn's famous jewelry collection, but thought nothing of it at the time. The reading of the will confirmed what grandmother had told me. The jewelry collection was mine, the house and remaining assets to be divided equally. My father cleared his throat awkwardly when this was announced, and my mother wouldn't meet my eyes. But again, in my grief, I didn't register the significance. It was 2 weeks later when I arrived at my parents' house for our monthly family dinner and noticed my mother wearing an unfamiliar pair of sapphire earrings. Earrings I immediately recognized from grandmother's collection. "Those are beautiful, Mom," I said carefully, setting down my purse. "They look like grandmother's." A tense silence fell over the dining room. My father suddenly became very interested in the pattern on his dinner plate. Cassandra, who had flown in from New York, twisted her engagement ring nervously. "About that," my mother began, her voice higher than usual. "We were going to tell you tonight. Given the circumstances, we thought it made sense to repurpose the jewelry." "Repurpose?" I repeated, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. "Cassandra is getting married in 6 months," my father cut in, as if this explained everything. "And you know how much your grandmother loved her. She would have wanted to contribute." I stared at them, not comprehending at first. "Contribute what?" "The wedding is going to be at the Belmont Hotel," Cassandra interjected, excitement overriding any sensitivity to the situation. "Carter's family expects a certain standard. We've invited over 300 guests, including some of his father's business associates. It's an investment in our future, really." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "The jewelry collection is being sold to a private collector. The funds will cover the wedding expenses and give Cassandra and Carter a nice start. Your grandmother would have approved. She always believed in investing in the future." I felt as if I'd been doused in ice water. That collection was left to me in grandmother's will. It's legally mine. My father cleared his throat again, a sound I was beginning to hate. "Actually, there was a small issue with the paperwork. The executor listed the jewelry as part of the general estate assets rather than a specific bequest. Technically, as co-executors, your mother and I had discretion over its disposition." The careful, legalistic language told me everything. They had found a loophole, or created one, to take what was rightfully mine and give it to Cassandra. Again. "You sold my inheritance, without even consulting me, to pay for Cassandra's wedding?" My voice was deadly quiet. "Olivia, don't be dramatic," my mother sighed. "You're financially stable. You don't need heirloom jewelry collecting dust in a safe deposit box. Cassandra is starting her life with Carter. This wedding is a crucial networking opportunity. His father is a partner at Grayson and Holt." "It's not about needing it," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's about respecting grandmother's wishes. It's about respecting me." "We're helping the daughter who needs it," my father said firmly. "That's what parents do." I looked at Cassandra, hoping to see some discomfort, some recognition of the injustice. Instead, she smiled apologetically and said, "You'll be my maid of honor, of course. The dresses are burgundy. It'll look stunning with your complexion." That was the moment something broke inside me. Not just broke, shattered. Years of being overlooked, years of Cassandra's needs automatically trumping mine, years of swallowing my hurt and telling myself it didn't matter. It all crystallized into a cold, clear resolve. I stood up from the table, my dinner untouched. "I have to go." "Olivia, don't be childish," my mother called after me. "Family supports each other. This is supporting family." I paused at the door and looked back at them. My father's stern disapproval, my mother's dismissive irritation, Cassandra's oblivious excitement. The sapphires at my mother's ears caught the light, taunting me. "I'll remember that," I said quietly. "Family supports each other. I'll definitely remember that." As I drove away from my childhood home that night, tears streaming down my face. I made a decision. For once in my life, I wouldn't just accept being sidelined. For once, I wouldn't be practical, dutiful Olivia, who never made waves. My grandmother had believed in me, had seen my worth even when my own parents couldn't. I would honor her memory by standing up for myself. Little did my family know that I had spent the last 5 years building connections in the banking industry, specializing in distressed mortgage assets. Little did they know that their own mortgage, refinanced 3 years ago to pay for renovations to the house, had been bundled with others and sold to investors during a market restructuring. Little did they know that one of those investors was a holding company I had created specifically to acquire undervalued real estate debt. Little did they know that for the past 8 months, I had owned the mortgage on my parents' home. I didn't know yet how or when I would use this information. But as grandmother Evelyn always said, knowledge is power, timing is everything, and sometimes justice takes patience. What I did know was this. The perfect Reed family facade was about to crack, and for once, Cassandra wouldn't be the center of attention. The weeks following that disastrous family dinner were some of the loneliest of my life. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on additional clients. My colleagues noticed the change, but knew better than to pry. Only my assistant Marcus dared to comment when he found me at my desk at 9 p.m. on a Friday, surrounded by financial reports. Either you're gunning for partner 5 years ahead of schedule, or you're avoiding something, he said, leaning against my doorframe. I looked up, bleary-eyed. Is there a third option? Revenge plotting? He suggested with a raised eyebrow. You've got that look. I laughed despite myself. Marcus had been with me for 3 years and could read me better than my own family. Not revenge. Justice, maybe. Want to talk about it over a drink? Non-alcoholic for me since I'm driving, but you look like you could use something stronger. That night at a quiet bar downtown, I told Marcus everything about my grandmother's jewelry, my parents' betrayal, and the ironic twist that I owned their mortgage through my investment company, Reed Financial Solutions. Marcus searched for the right word, stirring his club soda thoughtfully. That's cold-blooded, Olivia. I love it. I haven't done anything yet, I reminded him. But you will, he said confidently. I've never seen you back down when something matters to you. The truth was, I didn't know exactly what I planned to do with my leverage. Foreclosure seemed extreme and ultimately self-defeating. I didn't want to make my parents homeless. I just wanted them to acknowledge the pain they'd caused me, to recognize for once that their treatment of me had consequences. Meanwhile, wedding preparations for Cassandra and Carter Prescott III ramped up to fever pitch. My mother called almost daily with updates and demands. Olivia, the bridesmaids. Fitting is next Tuesday at 3 p.m. I've already cleared it with your office, she informed me one morning. You called my workplace? I asked, incredulous. Of course. I knew you'd forget otherwise. You're always so absorbed in those numbers of yours. I took a deep breath. Mom, you can't just call my office and rearrange my schedule. I have client meetings on Tuesday. Important ones. There was a pause on the line. Surely you can reschedule. This is your sister's wedding we're talking about. I'm aware, I said dryly. Send me the details and I'll see what I can do. See what you can do? My mother's voice rose an octave. Olivia Reed, this is family. You need to prioritize. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe through it. Like you prioritized my inheritance? Another silence. Longer this time. I thought we were past that. You're not still upset about some old jewelry, are you? We did what was best for the family. No, Mom. You did what was best for Cassandra. There's a difference. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to refuse to participate in the wedding altogether, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the lingering hope that somehow my family would recognize their mistake. Or perhaps it was something darker. The knowledge that my presence at the wedding would make the eventual revelation all the more dramatic. In the end, I rescheduled my meetings and attended the fitting. The boutique was exclusive, the kind with champagne on arrival and a personal consultant for each bridesmaid. The burgundy dress, I had to admit, was beautiful, a sleek floor-length design with an elegant neckline. The price tag made me wince. "Don't worry about the cost," my mother said, noticing my expression. "The father of the bride pays for the bridesmaids' dresses." I bit back a retort about where exactly that money was coming from. Instead, I smiled tightly and made small talk with Cassandra's other bridesmaids, women I barely knew from her art world circles in New York. They gushed about Carter's family connections, the honeymoon villa in Santorini, and the diamond the eye size of a small planet on Cassandra's finger. "And what do you do, Olivia?" one of them asked politely during a lull in the conversation. "I'm an investment advisor," I replied. "I specialize in real estate-backed securities." "Oh," she said, her interest visibly waning. "That sounds complicated." "It can be," I agreed. "But there's something satisfying about understanding the leverage points in financial structures, about knowing exactly where the pressure needs to be applied." My mother shot me a warning look, clearly sensing something in my tone. I smiled innocently and sipped my champagne. Later that week, I received an email from my contact at First Metropolitan Bank. A routine notification that one of my investment properties, my parents' mortgage, had missed a payment. This was unusual. My parents had always been financially responsible. Intrigued, I called my father under the pretense of discussing wedding details. "Everything all right with you and Mom?" I asked after we'd covered the latest drama about Cassandra's cake designer. "Financially, I mean." There was a pause. "Why do you ask?" "Just checking in. The wedding must be expensive, even with additional funds." My father cleared his throat, that same irritating sound from our dinner. "We're managing. The renovations on the house last year cost more than expected, and your mother's business has been slow with the economic downturn. But we're fine." "If you ever need financial advice, Dad, that is literally my job." "We don't need advice from our daughter," he said stiffly. "We've been handling our finances since before you were born." His pride was predictable but still disappointing. I debated telling him about the missed mortgage payment but decided against it. Instead, I made a call to the bank and arranged for a one-time payment grace period. Whatever my feelings about my parents' treatment of me, I wasn't ready to let their credit score suffer. Not yet, anyway. As the wedding approached, I found myself increasingly torn. Part of me wanted to move forward with my life, to accept that my family would never treat me with the same consideration they showed Cassandra. Another part wanted them to feel just a fraction of the hurt and betrayal I had experienced. "What's stopping you?" Marcus asked one evening as we worked late. "You literally hold the deed to their house. Most people would have already used that. Leverage." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "I keep thinking about what grandmother would want me to do." Marcus considered this. The same grandmother whose explicit wishes they ignored when they sold her jewelry? Fair point, I conceded. But she always taught me to act with integrity, even when others don't. "There's integrity in standing up for yourself," Marcus pointed out. Maybe that's what she'd want. I nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandmother's words. Knowledge is power, timing is everything, and sometimes justice takes patience. Was I being patient, or was I simply avoiding confrontation? What would justice look like in this situation? The answer came unexpectedly the following day. I was reviewing some financial documents when I noticed something curious about my parents' mortgage. When they had refinanced 3 years ago, they had taken out significantly more than needed for the renovations. They'd mentioned almost $200,000 more. Where had that money gone? A quick search through my company's database revealed a troubling pattern. My parents had been making increasingly large withdrawals over the past few years, culminating in a major financial strain around the time of Cassandra's college graduation. They had been supporting her financially much more extensively than they'd ever admitted, paying for her apartment in New York, covering her credit card bills, financing her attempts at launching an art career. They hadn't just sold my inheritance to fund Cassandra's wedding. They had been systematically sacrificing their own financial stability for years to maintain her lifestyle, a lifestyle she presented to the world as self-made success. The realization shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our family dynamic. This wasn't just about favoritism, this was about desperation. My parents were in financial trouble, largely of their own making, and rather than admit it, rather than ask for help from their financially successful daughter, they had resorted to taking what was rightfully mine. That night, I made my decision. I would confront them, not out of spite, but out of a strange, twisted form of love. They needed to face reality before they bankrupted themselves completely for the sake of appearances, and I needed to break free from the cycle of hurt and resentment that had defined our relationship for far too long. The wedding was in 3 weeks. I would wait until after the ceremony, after Cassandra had her perfect day. Then, at the first family dinner following the honeymoon, I would lay my cards on the table, all of them. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since discovering my parents' betrayal, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Grandmother Evelyn would approve, I thought. She had always believed in facing hard truths head-on. Justice, as she had taught me, sometimes requires patience, but that didn't mean it would never come. The day of Cassandra's wedding arrived with picture-perfect weather, sunshine streaming through scattered clouds, temperatures mild enough for the outdoor ceremony at the Belmont Hotel's renowned gardens. As I stood in the bridal suite, watching makeup artists and hairstylists fuss over my sister, I couldn't help but calculate the cost of each element. The champagne, real French, not California, the custom-designed dresses, the photographer who had flown in from Paris. It all spoke of money my parents didn't have. "You look beautiful," I told Cassandra honestly as she twirled in her gown, a hand-embroidered creation with a 10-foot train that had required 3 fittings and countless alterations. "Do you really think so?" she asked, genuine vulnerability, crossing her face for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship. "I want everything to be perfect." "It is," I assured her, pushing aside my complicated feelings. Whatever issues I had with my parents, today wasn't the day to address them. "Carter won't know what hit him." She smiled then, radiant with happiness. "I'm so glad you're here, Liv. I know we haven't always been close, but you're my sister." "My only sister." I swallowed hard, surprised by the sudden lump in my throat. "Where else would I be?" My mother bustled into the room then, already dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "The cars are ready. Bridesmaids need to head down in 5 minutes." She paused, looking at Cassandra with naked adoration. "Oh, darling, you're the most beautiful bride in the world." I slipped out as they embraced, needing a moment alone before facing the parade of photographs and small talk that awaited me. In a quiet corridor of the hotel, I checked my phone to find a text from Marcus. "Remember, deep breaths, fake smiles, and open bar. You've got this." I smiled despite myself. Marcus had become my rock during these difficult weeks, offering perspective when I was too close to the situation to see clearly. I texted back a quick thanks, then rejoined the wedding party just as we were being ushered toward the elevators. The ceremony itself was elaborate without being tasteless, a difficult balance that spoke to the influence of Carter's family, old money types who valued understated elegance over garish displays. I walked down the aisle ahead of Cassandra, conscious of the eyes on me, the whispered comments about the Reed sisters. Both so lovely, but so different. The older one's in finance, I hear. Shame she hasn't found someone yet. I kept my smile fixed in place, focusing on the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon rather than the commentary. At the altar, Carter waited with his groomsmen, looking appropriately nervous and awestruck when Cassandra appeared on our father's arm. The vows were traditional, with a few personalized touches. Cassandra promised to inspire Carter's creativity. He vowed to support her artistic pursuits. They exchanged rings. Hers a band to match her enormous engagement diamond, his a simple platinum circle. When they kissed, the assembled guests broke into applause, and I found myself clapping along, genuinely happy for my sister, despite everything else. At the reception, I sat at the head table, making conversation with Carter's best man, a childhood friend who worked in his father's law firm, and sipping champagne that probably cost more per bottle than my first month's rent after college. The hotel ballroom had been transformed with cascading flowers, crystal chandeliers, and table settings that included individual hand-calligraphed place cards and menu cards detailing the 5-course meal. Quite a production, Carter's best man commented following my gaze around the room. It certainly is, I agreed. I hear you work in finance? Must be fascinating. I turned my attention back to him. It can be. I specialize in real estate investments. Really? My father's been looking at diversifying our family portfolio with some property holdings. Maybe we should talk business later. I smiled politely. I'd be happy to provide some general advice, but I should warn you, I charge my usual consultation fee even at weddings. He laughed, taking it as a joke rather than the boundary it was intended to be. I like you, Olivia Reed. You're different. From what I expected. What did you expect? He shrugged. From what Carter said about Cassandra's family, well, I thought you'd all be more like your sister. Artistic and impractical, I suggested with a raised eyebrow. Something like that. He had the grace to look embarrassed. No offense intended. None taken. Cassandra and I took different paths. Hers happens to be more visible. And expensive, he added with another laugh, clearly feeling we were sharing some private joke at my sister's expense. I felt my smile harden. She's talented. She just needed support to find her footing. Of course, he backtracked, sensing he'd crossed a line. Carter's absolutely besotted with her work. Between us, his father's connections are already lining up gallery showings for next season. More handouts, more doors being opened, more validation that Cassandra's path, charm, beauty, and family support was the right one. I excused myself shortly after, claiming a need to check on my mother, who was indeed looking overwhelmed as she flitted between tables, ensuring everything was perfect. Mom? I caught her arm gently as she rushed past. Sit down for a minute. Everything's fine. The cake table doesn't have the right backdrop, she fretted, and the band is playing too loudly for the older guests. The cake looks beautiful where it is, and I'll speak to the band, I promised. But you need to enjoy this. You're the mother of the bride, not the event coordinator. She allowed me to guide her to her seat, looking suddenly exhausted beneath her perfectly applied makeup. When did you become so practical, Olivia? I've always been practical, I reminded her, signaling a waiter for a glass of water. You just never noticed because Cassandra was always doing something more dramatic. My mother flinched slightly at the edge in my voice. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked quietly. Name 3 achievements of mine that you celebrated as enthusiastically as Cassandra's first art show. She opened her mouth, closed it, then seemed to deflate. You never needed the same kind of attention. You were always so capable. Everyone needs attention, Mom, especially from their parents. Before she could respond, the wedding planner appeared, announcing it was time for the father-daughter dance. My mother straightened, professional smile back in place, and hurried off to make sure my father was ready. I watched her go, wondering if my words had made any impact at all. The rest of the reception proceeded according to the meticulously planned schedule. Toasts were made, cake was cut, and Cassandra and Carter took their first dance as husband and wife to a song that had been specially composed for the occasion. I performed my duties as maid of honor, holding Cassandra's bouquet, helping with her dress when she needed the bathroom, ensuring her champagne glass was never empty. When it came time for my toast, I stood and surveyed the room filled with faces I mostly didn't recognize. What could I say about a sister I had spent most of my life competing with, usually unsuccessfully? The truth, that I had often felt invisible beside her, would hardly be appropriate. Instead, I spoke about Cassandra's creativity, her ability to see beauty in unexpected places, and my wishes for her happiness with Carter. Too many would see this as just another society wedding, I concluded, raising my glass. But those who know Cassandra understand that even in convention, she finds ways to express her unique vision. May your marriage be as beautiful and surprising as your art, little sister. To Cassandra and Carter. The guests applauded. Cassandra wiped away a tear, and my father nodded approvingly. Only my mother seemed to hear the subtle critique embedded in my words, her lips pressing together briefly before she raised her glass with the others. Later, as the reception wound down and guests began to disperse, I found myself alone on the terrace overlooking the hotel gardens. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the elaborate floral arrangements and the remnants of the ceremony seating. "There you are." My father's voice came from behind me. "Your mother was looking for you. Cassandra and Carter are about to leave for the airport." I turned to face him. "I'll be right in." He hesitated, then joined me at the railing. It was a beautiful wedding. "Yes," I agreed. "Very beautiful. Very expensive." My father's expression tightened. "Today isn't the day for that discussion, Olivia." "When is the day, Dad? Before or after you miss another mortgage payment?" His head snapped toward me. "How do you know about that?" I met his gaze steadily. "I know a lot of things. We'll talk after they get back from the honeymoon. All of us." For a moment, I thought he might argue, but instead, he seemed to age before my eyes, the confident facade crumbling to reveal the exhausted, financially strained man beneath. "All right," he conceded. "After the honeymoon." We returned inside in time to see Cassandra and Carter off, showered with rose petals as they ran to the waiting limousine. My sister paused to hug me fiercely before climbing in. "I love you, Liv," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." I hugged her back, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Be happy, Cass. That's all I want." As the limousine pulled away, my mother appeared beside me, linking her arm through mine in a rare gesture of affection. "You were wonderful today, Olivia. I know it couldn't have been easy." I looked at her, taken aback by this acknowledgement. "What do you mean?" She patted my hand. Her diamond bracelet, another piece from grandmother's collection, I realized, with a pang, catching the light. "I'm not completely oblivious. I know you've been upset about the jewelry, but you put that aside for your sister's happiness, and I'm proud of you for that." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. She thought my restraint today was something to be proud of, rather than the bare minimum of decent behavior. The gulf between us suddenly seemed impossibly wide. "We should finish saying goodbye to the guests," I said finally. "And then I think you and Dad need to get some rest. It's been a long day." My mother squeezed my arm before releasing it. "You're right, as usual. Always my practical girl." As I watched her walk away to thank Carter's parents for their generosity, I felt a strange combination of sadness and resolve. The wedding was over. Cassandra had her perfect day. Now it was time to address the reality my parents had been avoiding for far too long, and the betrayal I had been nursing like a wound. 3 weeks, I reminded myself. 3 weeks until Cassandra and Carter returned from their honeymoon in Santorini. 3 weeks to prepare for the conversation that would either heal my family or fracture it beyond repair. 3 weeks until I revealed that I owned their mortgage. The fee. 3 weeks after Cassandra's wedding passed both too quickly and agonizingly slowly. I threw myself into work, putting together a comprehensive financial analysis of my parents' situation. The picture it painted was bleaker than even I had imagined. Beyond the mortgage they were struggling to pay, they had accumulated nearly $120,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards. My mother's interior design business had been operating at a loss for the past 2 years, with fewer and fewer clients as economic uncertainty made people hesitant to spend on luxury home renovations. My father's pension from the school district was substantial but not enough to maintain their lifestyle, especially with the additional burden of supporting Cassandra. "They're one emergency away from bankruptcy," Marcus observed as he reviewed the documents with me in my office one evening. "And they spent $300,000 on a wedding? That's not just irresponsible, it's delusional." "The jewelry collection was worth more than that," I pointed out. "Closer to $350,000 if they got a fair price, which I doubt they did given how quickly the sale happened." Marcus shook his head. "Still not enough to fix the hole they've dug? They need a complete financial overhaul, downsizing, debt consolidation, serious budget restructuring." I nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "The question is whether they'll listen to me." "You own their house," Marcus reminded me gently. "They might not have a choice." That was technically true, but wielding that power felt wrong somehow. I didn't want to strong-arm my parents into financial responsibility. I wanted them to recognize their mistakes and make amends of their own accord. But given their track record, especially regarding Cassandra, I wasn't optimistic. I decided to seek another perspective. Grandmother Evelyn's best friend, Ruth Hopkins, still lived in town and had been like a second grandmother to me growing up. I called and invited her to lunch at her favorite cafe, a quaint spot near the town square that served the best quiche in 3 counties. Ruth was in her early 80s, but carried herself with the energy of someone decades younger. Her silver hair was cut in a stylish bob and her eyes missed nothing behind tortoiseshell glasses. She hugged me tightly when I arrived. "Olivia, darling, it's been too long. I wanted to attend the wedding, but my arthritis was acting up something terrible. That day, you didn't miss much," I said, helping her into her seat. "Just the usual society circus." Ruth chuckled. "Your grandmother would have hated all that fuss. Remember how she eloped with your grandfather? Drove to Nevada in that beat-up Chevy of his and got married by an Elvis impersonator." I smiled at the story I'd heard countless times. "She always said it was the best decision she ever made." "Second best," Ruth corrected. "The best was starting her jewelry business. That woman had an eye like no other." She peered at me over her menu. "I was surprised not to see you wearing any of her pieces at the ceremony. Eleanor had on those sapphire earrings Evelyn bought in Brussels." I hesitated, unsure how much Ruth knew. "The jewelry wasn't passed to me as planned," I said carefully. Ruth's expression darkened. "What do you mean? Evelyn was explicit about that collection going to you. She showed me the will herself." Slowly, I explained what had happened. The paperwork issue, my parents' decision to sell the collection, to fund Cassandra's wedding, the missed mortgage payment, and my discovery that I inadvertently owned their home through my investment company. Ruth listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly stormy. When I finished, she set down her teacup with a decisive click. "Those fools," she said flatly. "Evelyn must be spinning in her grave." "What would she have advised me to do?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me for weeks. Ruth considered, this, absent-mindedly stirring her tea. "Evelyn believed in consequences, you know. She wasn't one for coddling people who made bad decisions, not even family. Especially not family, actually. So she'd want me to foreclose?" The thought made my stomach churn. "Good heavens, no," Ruth looked shocked. She wouldn't want you to destroy them, but she would expect you to hold them accountable. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your grandmother left you that jewelry because you were the one who appreciated its true value. Not just the price tag, but the stories, the craftsmanship, the history. She wanted it preserved, not liquidated for a one-day extravaganza. I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I miss her so much, Ruth. She was the only one who ever really saw me. I see you, Ruth said firmly. And Evelyn saw. You clearly enough for a lifetime. Don't let your parents' blindness define your worth. We finished our lunch, conversation turning to happier topics. Ruth's grandchildren, her upcoming cruise to Alaska, her book club's latest selection. As we parted, she hugged me again and whispered, "Be firm but fair. That's what Evelyn would say. And remember, sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones most in need of our help, even if they don't know it yet." Her words stayed with me as I finalized my preparations for the family dinner. Cassandra and Carter were due back from their honeymoon tomorrow, and my mother had already texted to arrange a welcome home meal at their house for Sunday evening. Perfect timing. I enlisted Marcus's help in preparing a complete financial restructuring plan for my parents. We worked through various scenarios, ultimately settling on one that would allow them to keep their house, but required significant lifestyle changes. Selling their vacation cottage at the lake, my mother returning to work full-time rather than taking only the design projects that interested her, my father potentially coming out of retirement to teach part-time. With disciplined adherence to the plan, they could be debt-free within 5 years, excluding the mortgage. What if they refuse? Marcus asked as we reviewed the final documents. Then I'll need to make some difficult decisions, I admitted. But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, rehearsing what I would say, imagining their reactions, preparing counterarguments for their inevitable excuses. Around 3 a.m., exhausted but still wired, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to my grandmother. Dear Grandmother Evelyn, tomorrow I'll confront Mom and Dad about everything. The jewelry, the finances, the years of favoring Cassandra. I'm terrified, to be honest. Not of standing up for myself, but of the fallout. What if this breaks our family beyond repair? What if they never forgive me? Then again, I'm not sure I've forgiven them yet either. The jewelry was never just about the monetary value. It was about you seeing me, choosing me. When they took that away, it felt like they were erasing the one relationship where I came first. I keep asking myself what you would advise me to do. Ruth says to be firm, but fair. To hold them accountable without destroying them. To remember that sometimes the people who hurt us most need our help the most. I'm trying to keep that in mind. I've prepared a financial plan that could save them from bankruptcy. I'm offering help, not just judgment. But I won't lie. Part of me wants them to feel the sting of comeuppance. To understand, just for a moment, what it's like to be overlooked, to have your wishes disregarded. Is that wrong of me? To want justice alongside reconciliation? I wish you were here to guide me through this. But maybe your guidance was in the lessons you taught me all along, about standing tall, about knowing my worth, about making hard choices with integrity. I'll try to make you proud tomorrow. To be firm, but fair. To seek a path forward that honors both truth and compassion. My love, Olivia. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. The act of writing had calmed me, clarified my purpose. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration, of financial stability, of truthful relationships, of proper respect for my grandmother's wishes. I finally fell asleep around dawn, more certain than ever of the path ahead. Sunday arrived with unusual speed. I dressed carefully in a slate blue dress that had been my grandmother's favorite on me, paired with simple pearl earrings she had given me for my college graduation, one of the few pieces of her jewelry I still possessed. I packed my financial documents in a leather portfolio and drove to my parents' house with a sense of calm determination. Cassandra and Carter were already there when I arrived, tanned and glowing from their Santorini honeymoon. They greeted me with enthusiasm, Cassandra hugging me tightly while Carter shook my hand with new brotherly warmth. "Liv, we brought you something," Cassandra exclaimed, handing me a small package wrapped in blue paper. "It reminded us of you." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of an owl. "The shopkeeper said owls represent wisdom," she explained. "And you're the wisest person I know." The gesture caught me off guard. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "Thank you." "Carter, be a dear and open some wine," my mother called from the kitchen. "The good bottles we've been saving, they're in the rack by the refrigerator." I followed Carter to help, using the moment to observe the house with new eyes, the high-end appliances purchased during the renovation, the designer furniture, the original artwork on the walls. All symbols of affluence that my parents could no longer afford. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, another pandemic-era renovation that had rarely been used before today. My mother had prepared an elaborate meal: roast lamb, rosemary potatoes, asparagus with hollandaise, and chocolate soufflé for dessert. The table settings included the fine china and crystal that had belonged to my great-grandmother. The conversation flowed easily at first, dominated by Cassandra and Carter's tales of Santorini, the sunsets, the private villa, the yacht excursion, to neighboring islands. My parents listened with rapt attention, my mother sighing wistfully at descriptions of the Mediterranean light, my father nodding approvingly at mentions of important people Carter had connected with at the hotel bar. Ate quietly, waiting for the natural opening. It came sooner than expected, as Carter raised his wine glass in a toast. "To the Reed family, for welcoming me so warmly and for raising the amazing woman I'm now lucky enough to call my wife. And to Thomas and Eleanor specifically, thank you. For the most spectacular wedding and for your ongoing support. My parents can't stop talking about how perfect everything was." My father beamed. "Nothing but the best for our daughter." "Both daughters," my mother added quickly, glancing at me. "We're just as proud of Olivia's accomplishments." It was the opening I needed. I set down my fork and looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "Speaking of accomplishments and support," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected, "there's something important we need to discuss." "Discuss?" My mother's smile froze in place. "Olivia, dear, this is a celebration. Can it wait?" "I'm afraid it can't," I said, reaching for my leather portfolio. "And this concerns everyone at this table." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Olivia, if this is about the jewelry again..." "It's about much more than the jewelry, Dad," I extracted. The folder containing my financial analysis. "It's about the future of this family." A tense silence fell over the dining room. Cassandra looked between our parents and me, confusion evident on her face. "What's going on? Did something happen while we were away?" "Nothing new," I assured her. "This has been building for years. The jewelry was just the tipping point." My mother's lips thinned to a line. "I don't think this is appropriate dinner conversation." "Is there ever an appropriate time in this family to discuss difficult truths?" I asked, keeping my voice measured. "Because I've been waiting for that moment for most of my life." Carter cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps I should give your family some privacy." "No," I said firmly. "You're part of this family now, Carter, and what affects the Reeds affects you too, especially financially." That got everyone's attention. My father straightened in his chair, his expression hardening. "What exactly are you implying, Olivia?" I laid the documents on the table, turning to the summary page I'd prepared. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You and Mom are in serious financial trouble. You have 6 maxed-out credit cards, totaling nearly $120,000 in debt. Mom's business has been operating at a loss for 2 years. And you missed your mortgage payment last month. My mother gasped. How could you possibly know that? Because I'm in finance, Mom. It's literally my job to know these things. I took a deep breath. But there's more. The money you got from selling grandmother's jewelry collection, my inheritance, wasn't enough to cover Cassandra's wedding and stabilize your finances. You're still sinking, and if drastic measures aren't taken immediately, you'll be facing bankruptcy within 18 months. Cassandra's face had drained of color. Is this true? Mom? Dad? Are you having money problems? My father's jaw worked, silently for a moment before he managed to speak. We've had some temporary setbacks. Nothing we can't handle. Temporary? I echoed. Dad, you've been supporting Cassandra financially since college. Her apartment, her credit cards, her art career. You remortgaged this house 3 years ago and took out $200,000 more than you needed for renovations. Where did that money go? All eyes turned to Cassandra, who looked stricken. I didn't know, she whispered. You always said it was fine, that you were happy to help until I got established. Of course we're happy to help, my mother said quickly. That's what parents do. Olivia is exaggerating the situation. Am I? I slid another document forward, a printout of their mortgage statement showing the missed payment and subsequent grace period arrangement. This isn't exaggeration, Mom. This is reality, and it gets worse. I pulled out another paper, a deed, of ownership for their mortgage, clearly showing it had been purchased by Reed Financial Solutions, my holding company. My father stared at it uncomprehendingly for a moment before understanding dawned in his eyes. You, he began, his voice barely audible. You own our mortgage? Yes, I said simply. I do. A stunned silence fell over the table. Carter looked completely lost, while Cassandra's eyes darted between our parents and me, trying to process what was happening. My mother was the first to recover, anger flashing across her face. You did this deliberately? You bought our mortgage to… What? Control us? Threaten us? No, I said firmly. I bought a portfolio of mortgages as an investment 8 months ago. Yours happened to be among them. I didn't realize it until after you sold my inheritance. And now you're going to what? Foreclose on us? Throw your own parents out on the street? My father's voice rose with each word. Is that your revenge for the jewelry? I felt a flash of hurt at his immediate assumption of malice on my part, but I pushed it aside. No, Dad, I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to help you. I reached into my portfolio and extracted the financial restructuring plan Marcus and I had prepared. This is a comprehensive plan to get you out of debt within 5 years. It includes refinancing your mortgage at a lower rate, consolidating your credit card debt, and creating a sustainable budget that matches your actual income. We don't need financial advice from our daughter, my father said stiffly. The same pride I'd heard in his voice during our phone call weeks ago. Actually, you do, I countered. Because your current financial advisors have let you dig this hole. And because, unlike them, I have a vested interest in seeing you succeed. I paused, meeting his gaze directly. Both as your mortgage holder and as your daughter. My mother reached for her wine glass with a shaking hand. What exactly are you proposing, Olivia? Several things. First, you need to downsize. This house is too expensive for your current income. The lake cottage needs to be sold immediately. But we've had that cottage since you girls were little, my mother protested. All our summer memories don't pay bills, Mom, I said gently. Second, you need to take your business in a new direction. Luxury design isn't selling in this economy, but there's a growing market for affordable, sustainable home makeovers. I've included market research and potential rebranding strategies. My mother looked offended but didn't interrupt as I continued. Dad, you need to consider part-time teaching or consulting. Your pension isn't enough, especially with the debt load you're carrying. I turned to Cassandra and Carter. And you two need to be self-sufficient. No more parental subsidies for rent, credit cards, or career expenses. Cassandra flinched as if I'd slapped her. I didn't know they couldn't afford it, she said defensively. They never said anything. Because they didn't want to disappoint you, I explained, softening my tone. They love you so much they were willing to bankrupt themselves rather than say no to you. Tears welled in Cassandra's eyes. I would never have asked if I'd known. I believe you, I assured her. But now you do know. And knowledge comes with responsibility. Carter put his arm around Cassandra's shoulders. We'll be fine, he said. My salary at the firm is more than adequate for both of us. I nodded appreciatively at him before turning back to my parents. If you follow this plan, you can avoid bankruptcy and keep a modified version of your lifestyle. You'll need to make sacrifices, but you won't lose everything. And if we refuse? My father asked, a dangerous edge to his voice. I met his challenge directly. Then as your mortgage holder, I would be within my rights to begin foreclosure proceedings after consistent non-payment. As your daughter, I would be devastated to take that step. But I won't continue enabling financial decisions that are destroying this family. My mother burst into tears. How can you be so cold? This is your family you're talking about. Yes, I agreed. My family. The same family that sold my inheritance without consulting me. The same family that has consistently prioritized Cassandra's wants over my needs. The same family that has never, not once, acknowledged the pain that caused me. My voice cracked slightly on the last words, the emotion I'd been holding in check finally breaking through. I'm not being cold, Mom. I'm being truthful. Something this family has never been very good at. Cassandra reached across the table and took my hand. I never knew you felt that way, Liv. I'm so sorry. Her sincere apology caught me off guard. For years, I'd harbored resentment against her as much as our parents, assuming she was complicit in the favoritism. But the shock and regret on her face now suggested she'd been as unaware of the family dynamics as she had been of the financial strain. It's not your fault, I told her. You didn't create the pattern, but I benefited from it, she acknowledged. At your expense. My father had been studying the financial documents while we spoke. Now he looked up, his expression a complex mixture of anger, shame, and reluctant respect. Some of these recommendations, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the admission. They're not unreasonable. None of them are unreasonable, I corrected him. They're necessary. The question is whether you're willing to accept help from me, from the daughter. You've always underestimated. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. You make it sound like we've been terrible parents. Not terrible, I said honestly. Just human, with very human blind spots. I reached across the table and took her hand. I don't want to punish you, Mom. I want to help you, and maybe in the process heal some very old wounds. A heavy silence fell over the table as my parents absorbed everything. Finally, my father sighed deeply. We need time to review all this, he said, gesturing to the documents. To discuss our options. Of course, I agreed. Take a few days, but not too long. The grace period on your mortgage ends next week. Carter, who had been quiet throughout most of the exchange, suddenly spoke up. Mr. and Mrs. Reed, if I may. As someone who works in corporate law, I can see that Olivia has put together an extremely thorough and fair proposal. One that protects everyone's interests while addressing the underlying issues. I would strongly advise you to consider it. His unexpected support seemed to sway my father, who nodded slowly. We'll review everything and get back to you, Olivia. That's all I ask, I said, gathering my documents and returning them to my portfolio. That, and one other thing. What's that? My mother asked warily. I met her gaze directly. An acknowledgement of the hurt you caused by selling grandmother's jewelry without consulting me. not because of its monetary value, but because it represented her recognition of me, of my worth in this family. My mother's lips trembled. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said softly, "but you did. And pretending otherwise won't help us move forward." My father cleared his throat. "You're right," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "We should have consulted you. We were desperate and short-sighted. And I'm sorry, Olivia." The simple apology, perhaps the first genuine one he'd ever offered me, hit harder than I expected. I blinked rapidly against sudden tears. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot." Cassandra, still holding my hand, squeezed it gently. "Is there any way to track down the jewelry? To try to buy it back?" "Probably not," I admitted. "But that's not really the point anymore." "What is the point?" my father asked. I considered the question carefully. "The point is that we stop pretending, that we acknowledge our mistakes and try to do better, that we recognize each other's value beyond what we can give or take." I looked around at their faces, uncertain, vulnerable, but present in a way they hadn't been before. "The point is that we become a real family, one built on truth rather than appearances." My mother reached for my hand, completing a circle with Cassandra's. "I think we can try," she said. "I think we need to try." As the conversation shifted to practicalities, which items to sell first, how to approach downsizing, whether my mother's business contacts could help Cassandra establish legitimate gallery connections, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation I'd feared for weeks had led not to further estrangement, but to the first hints of actual connection. There would be difficult days ahead. Old habits wouldn't change overnight. But for the first time in years, perhaps in my entire life, I felt truly seen by my family, not as the practical, responsible daughter who needed no attention, but as a woman with her own hurts, her own needs, and her own considerable strengths. As we finished our dessert, the chocolate soufflé somehow forgotten during the intense conversation and now slightly fallen but still delicious, I thought of my grandmother. She would have approved, I decided. Not of my parents' financial recklessness or their dismissal of her wishes regarding the jewelry, but of this moment of reckoning, this chance for truth and fresh starts. Knowledge is power. Timing is everything, and sometimes justice takes patience. Her words echoed in my mind as I looked around the table at my imperfect, struggling but finally honest family. Justice had indeed required patience, but it had come at last. 1 year later, I stood in the doorway of my parents' new home, a charming, 3-bedroom bungalow in a quieter part of town. It was less than half the size of their previous house, but meticulously maintained, with a small garden my mother had already filled with her favorite perennials. The downsizing had been difficult but necessary, and the proceeds from selling their larger home had eliminated most of their credit card debt. "Just in time," my mother called from the kitchen. "Cassandra and Carter are already here." I followed her voice to find my sister arranging a cheese platter, while Carter uncorked a bottle of wine. The scene was markedly different from our family gatherings of the past. No expensive crystal, no elaborate multi-course meal, just simple food served on everyday dishes. "Liv!" Cassandra embraced me warmly. "How was Chicago?" "Productive," I replied, accepting a glass of wine from Carter. "The expansion is on track. We should be able to open the new office by spring." My financial advisory firm had grown substantially over the past year, partly due to a feature in a national business magazine about ethical investing. The article had focused on Reed Financial Solutions' commitment to helping families create sustainable wealth management plans, a direction inspired by my own family's journey. My father emerged from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose and a spreadsheet in his hand. "Olivia, I've been reviewing our quarterly budget. I think we can increase the principal payments on the mortgage starting next month." Let me see, I said, accepting the spreadsheet. My father's meticulous tracking represented perhaps the most dramatic change in our family dynamic. The man who had once been too proud to discuss finances with his daughter now sought my advice regularly and implemented it faithfully. This looks good, I confirmed after reviewing the numbers. But don't stretch too thin. The emergency fund needs to remain untouched. He nodded, a hint of his old stubbornness flashing across his face before dissolving into a rueful smile. You sound like Evelyn. Highest compliment possible, I replied, returning his smile. We gathered around the dining table, a modest oak piece that had been in the family for generations and one of the few items they'd kept from the old house. My mother had returned to work full-time, but with a new business model focused on affordable home styling for average families rather than luxury design for the wealthy. To everyone's surprise, particularly hers, the business was thriving. "Have news," Cassandra announced as we served ourselves from the various dishes on the table. "I sold 3 paintings last week." "That's wonderful," my mother exclaimed. "To whom?" "Real clients," Cassandra emphasized. "Not friends of Dad's or Carter's colleagues. People who saw my work at the community art center and wanted it for their homes." The pride in her voice was different from before, earned rather than expected. After our confrontation, Cassandra had insisted on supporting herself through her art, taking a part-time job at a local gallery while developing her portfolio. The discipline of financial independence had somehow strengthened rather than stifled her creativity. "I've been thinking," she continued, glancing at Carter, who nodded encouragingly, "about grandmother's jewelry collection." A brief silence fell over the table. Although we had made significant progress as a family, the topic of the jewelry remained sensitive. "What about it?" my father asked cautiously. "I want to try to find it," Cassandra said. "Or at least some pieces from it. I've been setting aside money from each sale, and Carter and I have discussed using part of our savings." I stared at my sister, momentarily speechless. "Cass, why would you do that?" She met my gaze directly. "Because it was wrong." "What happened?" "Because grandmother wanted you to have it. And because I benefited from that wrong without even knowing it." My mother reached across the table and took Cassandra's hand. "We all participated in that wrong," she said softly. "Your father and I most of all." It was another sign of how far we'd come. This willingness to acknowledge past mistakes without defensiveness or excuses. "I appreciate the thought," I told Cassandra. "But you don't need to spend your hard-earned money trying to undo the past." "It's not about undoing," she insisted. "It's about making things right where we can. I've already contacted the buyer, that collector Mom and Dad sold to. He still has most of the collection." My father looked startled. "You found Brennan? How?" "Carter's firm represents several art collectors. It wasn't that difficult to make the connection." She turned back to me. "He's willing to sell back some key pieces. Not everything, but the items grandmother specifically mentioned in her stories. The emerald earrings from Paris. The Art Deco necklace she wore to her 40th anniversary." Emotion welled in my throat. Those were indeed the pieces that held the most sentimental value for me, the ones connected to specific memories with grandmother Evelyn. "We'd like to start with those," Carter added, "as an investment in our family's future." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," my mother urged. "Let us begin to make amends." I nodded, not trusting my voice for a moment. "Thank you," I managed finally. "That would mean everything." As dinner continued, the conversation flowed easily between topics. My father's part-time teaching position at the community college, my mother's new client in the historic district, Carter's recent promotion. The tension and resentment that had characterized our family gatherings for so long had been replaced by something more genuine, if still occasionally awkward. Later, As we cleared the dishes, my father pulled me aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading me to his study. From his desk drawer, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This isn't from the collection, but it belonged to your grandmother." Inside was a delicate gold chain with a simple pendant, a small ruby surrounded by tiny pearls. "Her birthstone," I murmured, recognizing it immediately. "She wore it every day when she was building her business," my father explained. "I found it when we were packing to move. It must have been missed when—" He hesitated. "When the collection was sold." I closed my fingers around the pendant, feeling its weight, lighter than its significance would suggest. "Thank you for saving it for me." "I should have saved all of it for you," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't recognize sooner what it truly meant." As I drove home that evening, the ruby pendant around my neck and plans for recovering pieces of grandmother's collection taking shape, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The financial crisis had been addressed through difficult but necessary decisions. The emotional wounds had begun to heal through honest conversations and genuine efforts to understand each other. But perhaps most significantly, the invisible daughter had finally been seen, not just by her family, but by herself. In standing up for my inheritance, I had claimed something far more valuable than jewelry or property deeds. I had claimed my place in the family narrative, my right to be heard and respected. Grandmother Evelyn would have approved, I thought with a smile. Knowledge is power, timing is everything, and sometimes justice takes patience, and sometimes it brings unexpected gifts in its wake. 3 years after the fateful Sunday dinner where I revealed I owned my parents' mortgage, I stood in the elegant exhibition hall of the Mapleton Community Art Center. Around me, people sipped champagne and admired the artwork displayed on pristine white walls. At the center of the main gallery wall hung a portrait that drew the most attention. An oil painting of an elderly woman with knowing eyes and a subtle smile, her hands adorned with vintage rings, a familiar Art Deco necklace gracing her neck. "Your grandmother had remarkable presence," the gallery director commented, appearing at my side. "Cassandra captured it perfectly." "She did," I agreed, studying the portrait of grandmother Evelyn that had become the centerpiece of my sister's first solo exhibition. The exhibition, titled Legacy, featured portraits of influential women from our community with grandmother Evelyn as its heart. Cassandra had spent months interviewing women who had known her, gathering stories and impressions that informed her artistic interpretation. The result transcended mere likeness. It captured Evelyn's essence, her strength, and wisdom radiating from the canvas. "There you are," Marcus said, approaching with 2 champagne flutes. Now my business partner as well as my closest friend, he had supported me through every step of my family's transformation. Quite a turnout. "Better than we expected," I acknowledged, accepting the champagne. The exhibition opening had drawn not only art enthusiasts and local media, but potential investors interested in Cassandra's work. My parents moved through the crowd with quiet pride. My mother, elegant in a simple navy dress rather than the designer labels she once favored, engaged comfortably with gallery patrons. My father, who had eventually found satisfaction teaching economics at the community college, stood beside Cassandra as she explained her artistic process to an attentive group of students. In the corner, Carter chatted with my newest client, a retirement fund manager interested in diversifying into real estate investments. Our family connections, once strained by resentment, now served as bridges to new professional opportunities for all of us. "Ms. Reed?" A woman in her 60s approached, hand extended. "I'm Victoria Brennan. My husband Richard was the collector who purchased your grandmother's jewelry collection." I shook her hand, surprised. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Brennan. I understand your husband has been working with my sister to return some pieces." "Indeed," she smiled. "Richard couldn't attend tonight. He's overseeing an auction in London. But he wanted me to deliver something personally." From her clutch purse, She withdrew a small blue velvet box. This piece wasn't part of the original negotiation with your sister, but when Richard saw the announcement for this exhibition and realized the connection to Evelyn Reed, he insisted you should have it back. I opened the box with trembling fingers to find a pair of sapphire earrings, the very ones my mother had worn at that family dinner 3 years ago, the ones that had triggered our confrontation. Your grandmother purchased these in Brussels. In 1975, Victoria explained. They're quite special. The setting is unique, designed specifically for her by a Belgian jeweler who rarely worked with private clients. I know, I said softly. She bought them to celebrate her business's 20th anniversary. The first year she cleared 6 figures in profit. Victoria nodded approvingly. You know their story. Richard will be pleased. He believes strongly that such pieces should belong to those who understand their significance beyond market value. Please thank him for me, I managed, emotion tightening my throat. This means more than I can express. He suggested a fair price, outlined in this envelope. Victoria continued, handing me a sealed letter. No rush to decide. Take some time to consider. As she moved away to examine Cassandra's artwork, I opened the envelope. Inside was a brief note stating a figure substantially below market value, with a handwritten postscript. The true value of heirlooms cannot be measured in dollars, but in the stories they preserve. These earrings belong in your family's ongoing story. I tucked the note away, the sapphire earrings secure in my hand. Over the past 3 years, with Cassandra and Carter's help, several pieces of grandmother's collection had been returned, each one bringing not just the physical item, but a piece of our shared history back into the family. Is that what I think? It is? My mother asked, joining me with a glass of water rather than champagne, another change from the old days of constant social drinking. I opened the box to show her, watching as recognition flickered across her face. The Brussels sapphires, she murmured. Oh, Olivia. Mr. Brennan is offering them at a significant discount, I told her. I think I'll accept. Of course you should, she agreed immediately. They were always meant to be yours. She hesitated, then added, I'm sorry I wore them that night. It was thoughtless. It was a different time, I said simply. We were different people, and we were. The financial restructuring that had begun as a necessary intervention had evolved into a genuine transformation. My parents had not only accepted downsizing but embraced the simpler lifestyle it enabled. My mother's redesigned business now helped middle-class families create beautiful homes on realistic budgets. My father had discovered genuine fulfillment in teaching young people about financial literacy. Cassandra, perhaps most surprisingly, had flourished under the constraints of financial independence. Without our parents' safety net, she had developed discipline and focus that elevated her art from promising to truly exceptional. Her marriage to Carter remained strong, built on mutual respect rather than the social advantages my parents had initially valued. As for me, Reed Financial Solutions had expanded to 3 offices across the state, with a client list that included not only wealthy investors, but middle-class families seeking to build sustainable financial futures. The magazine feature had led to a book, Deal: Family Fortunes, Building Wealth Without Sacrificing Relationships, which had become a surprise bestseller in the financial advice category. Come see what Carter brought, my mother urged, leading me toward a small side gallery where a display case had been installed. Inside, arranged on black velvet, were 12 pieces from grandmother's jewelry collection that we had recovered so far. Each piece was accompanied by a small card detailing its history and significance. Beside the display hung a professionally framed copy of Grandmother Evelyn's will, specifically the clause leaving her jewelry collection to me. Carter arranged this as a surprise, my father explained, joining us. He thought it was important to acknowledge both the loss and the recovery publicly. It's perfect, I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. There's one more surprise, Cassandra called from across the room. Everyone, If I could have your attention, please. The crowd quieted as my sister, confident in a way that came from earned achievement rather than entitlement, addressed the gathering. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate these remarkable women and their legacies. As many of you know, my grandmother Evelyn Reed was not only an extraordinary businesswoman, but a passionate advocate for financial education for women. In her honor, and with the proceeds from this exhibition, my family is establishing the Evelyn Reed Scholarship for Women in Business at Mapleton Community College. Applause broke out as Cassandra continued. This annual scholarship will provide not only tuition, but mentorship and practical business experience to women pursuing entrepreneurship. My sister Olivia will chair the selection committee, bringing her financial expertise to ensure the scholarship creates lasting impact. I felt tears well in my eyes as Cassandra beckoned me to join her. This initiative, combining her artistic success with my financial knowledge to honor our grandmother, represented the healing of our family in the most meaningful way possible. As I moved to stand beside my sister, the sapphire earrings still in my hand, I thought about the long journey from invisibility to recognition, from resentment to reconciliation. The inheritance I had fought for turned out to be so much more than jewelry or property. It was the restoration of family bonds, the recognition of my worth, and the chance to extend Grandmother Evelyn's legacy to future generations. Knowledge is power, timing is everything, and sometimes justice takes patience. Grandmother had been right, as she so often was. But she had forgotten to mention one crucial truth, that sometimes when justice finally arrives, it brings unexpected gifts, healing, growth, and new beginnings that far outvalue what was initially lost. Together, Cassandra said, her arm around my shoulders as we faced the audience, we honor the past while building the future. I nodded, finally at peace with both. Part 8. The letter 5 years to the day after revealing I owned my parents' mortgage, I received a package in the mail. The return address showed my mother's neat handwriting, but the postmark was from Brussels, Belgium. Curious, I opened it in my home office, now decorated with photographs of family vacations and achievements, a visual testament to our healed relationships. Inside, I found a small wooden box with a familiar mother-of-pearl inlay, a miniature version of the one that had held Grandmother Evelyn's jewelry collection. Beneath it lay a letter in my mother's handwriting. Setting aside the box momentarily, I unfolded the pages and began to read. My dearest Olivia, as I write this, your father and I are sitting at a cafe in the Grand Place in Brussels on the final day of our anniversary trip. This morning, we visited the jewelry shop where your grandmother purchased the sapphire earrings all those years ago. The original jeweler has passed away, but his son remembers Evelyn Reed, the American woman with exceptional taste and shrewd negotiating skills were his exact words. I wanted to share this moment with you because it represents how far we've come. 5 years ago, we could never have afforded this trip. More importantly, we would never have chosen to trace your grandmother's footsteps, rather than simply visiting the usual tourist attractions. But your influence has changed us in ways that extend far beyond our financial decisions. In my generation, we were taught that love meant protection, shielding our children from difficulties, even if that meant hiding uncomfortable truths. I thought I was showing Cassandra love by supporting her financially and emotionally, never requiring her to face consequences or develop resilience. I thought I was showing you love by treating you as the strong one who didn't need the same attention or validation. I was wrong on both counts, and I'm profoundly grateful that you forced us to confront that truth 5 years ago. The enclosed box contains something special. While at the jewelry shop, we commissioned a piece using the design sketches they still had on file from your grandmother's visits. It's not an exact replica of anything she owned, but rather a new creation inspired by her aesthetic, a bridge between past and future, just as you have been for our family. With all my love and continued gratitude, Mom, with trembling fingers, I opened the wooden box. Inside lay a pendant, a delicate gold filigree design surrounding a small sapphire and ruby set side by side, representing Cassandra's and my birthstones. It hung on a chain similar to the Art Deco styles grandmother had favored, but with modern elements subtly incorporated. Attached was a small certificate of authenticity from the Brussels jeweler, with a handwritten note at the bottom. Designed in the spirit of Madame Reed, who understood that true value lies in connection. The gesture moved me deeply, not just the beautiful pendant itself, but what it represented. My mother had not only acknowledged our past, but transformed it into something new and meaningful. She had honored both her daughters equally in a piece that connected us to our grandmother's legacy. I fastened the pendant around my neck, where it nestled perfectly alongside the ruby pendant my father had given me years earlier. Then I picked up my phone to call my mother and thank her, but paused when I saw a text message from Cassandra with a photo attached. The image showed her wearing an identical pendant, clearly taken that morning judging by the European cafe setting. In the background, her message read, "Mom and Dad commissioned matching pieces for us both. Yours with you in spirit as we visit grandmother's favorite city. Love you, sis." I smiled, running my fingers over the pendant. 5 years ago, I had revealed a property deed in an act of necessary confrontation. Today, my parents had revealed something far more valuable, their complete understanding of what the inheritance had truly meant to me all along. It was never about the monetary value of the jewelry. It was about recognition, connection, and being seen. The matching pendants acknowledged that both daughters were equally valued, equally part of grandmother Evelyn's legacy. I dialed my mother's number, eager to hear her voice across the ocean and share this moment of completion. As the international ringtone sounded in my ear, I closed my hand around the pendant, a physical reminder that sometimes justice doesn't just take patience. Sometimes, when given room to grow, it transforms into something even more beautiful than we imagined. Reconciliation, understanding, and love. 10 years after the revelation that changed everything, the Reed family gathered at Mapleton Community College for a special ceremony. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as students, faculty, and community members filled the seats. On stage sat 5 young women, the newest recipients of the Evelyn Reed Scholarship for Women in Business. I adjusted my blazer as I prepared to take the podium. As chairperson of the Scholarship Foundation, this annual ceremony had become one of my most cherished responsibilities. Behind me, a large portrait of grandmother Evelyn, the same one Cassandra had painted for her first solo exhibition, watched over proceedings, her knowing eyes seeming to approve of her legacy's evolution. "Welcome to the 5th annual Evelyn Reed Scholarship Ceremony," I began, surveying the audience. "When we established this program a decade ago, we hope to support 5 women entrepreneurs each year. Thanks to the generosity of our donors and the success of our endowment investments, I'm proud to announce that beginning next year, we'll expand to support 10 scholars annually." Applause filled the auditorium. In the front row, my parents beamed with pride. Now in their 70s, they had embraced retirement with the same pragmatism they'd applied to rebuilding their finances. My father volunteered as a financial literacy coach for low-income families, while my mother taught design classes at the community center. Their modest lifestyle allowed them to contribute consistently to the scholarship fund. Beside them sat Cassandra and Carter with their 8-year-old twins, Evelyn and Thomas. Cassandra had established herself as a respected portrait artist with a 2-year waiting list for commissions. Carter had eventually left his father's law firm to start a practice specializing in helping artists protect their intellectual property, a decision his parents had initially questioned but now celebrated, as his practice thrived. "Before I introduce this year's scholars," I continued, "I'd like to share something special. 10 years ago, our family established this scholarship after navigating our own financial crisis. That journey taught us that true wealth isn't measured by properties owned or jewelry collected, but by honesty, resilience, and supporting each other's authentic paths. I touched the pendant that rarely left my neck, the matching piece my parents had commissioned in Brussels years ago. Cassandra wore hers today too, a silent symbol of our shared heritage and healed relationship. In honor of the program's 10th anniversary, we're unveiling a new initiative, I announced. The Evelyn Reed Business Incubator will provide workspace, mentorship, and seed funding for scholarship alumni ready to launch their ventures. This program represents our commitment not just to education, but to creating pathways for women entrepreneurs to succeed. Marcus, now my husband of 4 years, gave me an encouraging nod from his seat beside my parents. Our partnership had evolved naturally from professional collaboration to friendship to love, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values about money and family. After introducing each scholar and listening to their impressive plans, ranging from sustainable fashion to financial technology for underserved communities, I invited my family to join me on stage for the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new incubator space. As we stood together, scissors poised over the ceremonial ribbon, a journalist called out, "Ms. Reed, is it true that the initial funding for this scholarship came from your sister's wedding?" Cassandra and I exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication passing between us. The complex truth behind that question, the souled inheritance, the mortgage revelation, the painful confrontation that sparked our family's transformation, remained largely private, though rumors had circulated over the years. The scholarship's beginnings are rooted in our grandmother's legacy, I answered diplomatically. She taught us that financial empowerment isn't just about accumulating assets, but about creating opportunities and building something meaningful that outlasts us. And sometimes, Cassandra added with a warm smile my way, the most valuable inheritances aren't things at all, but the wisdom to recognize what truly matters. As we cut the ribbon together, my parents, Cassandra and Carter, their children, Marcus and I reflected on grandmother Evelyn's guiding principle that had seen me through the darkest days of family conflict. Knowledge is power. Timing is everything. And sometimes justice takes patience. What she couldn't have told me was how justice, once achieved, might evolve into something far more precious: reconciliation, growth, and the chance to create a legacy that honored her, in ways a jewelry collection never could. The Evelyn Reed scholars applauded as the ribbon fell away. These bright young women unaware that they were not just beneficiaries of our family's philanthropy, but heirs to a hard-won wisdom. That true wealth lies in having the courage to stand up for yourself while remaining open to healing and transformation. In the decade since I revealed I owned my parents' mortgage, we had all become rich in the ways that matter most, not through jewelry collections or property deeds, but through authentic relationships, purposeful work, and a shared commitment to extending grandmother Evelyn's legacy beyond our family to the community she had loved. As we toured the new incubator space, watching the scholars explore their future workstations with excitement, I knew with certainty that grandmother would have considered this the most valuable inheritance of all. 20 years after the inheritance dispute that transformed our family, I found myself clearing out grandmother Evelyn's cottage, the final piece of property we had collectively decided to sell. The modest home had served as a retreat and occasional rental property after my parents' financial recovery, but now it was time to let it go. In the attic, beneath loose floorboards I accidentally dislodged while moving an old trunk, I discovered a slim, leather-bound journal. The faded inscription read, "Evelyn Reed, Private Thoughts." Hands trembling, I opened it to find my grandmother's elegant handwriting filling the pages. Most entries were brief reflections on business decisions or family events, but one page, dated just 3 weeks before her death, caught my eye immediately. "I've decided the jewelry will go to Olivia. Thomas and Eleanor will protest. They've always favored Cassandra's creative spirit over Olivia's practical mind. They don't see that Olivia's strength masks a vulnerability they've never acknowledged. The jewelry represents more than monetary value. It's recognition of the quiet power I see in my eldest granddaughter. I suspect there may be trouble after I'm gone. I've witnessed Thomas and Eleanor's financial missteps, their inability to deny Cassandra anything. They may try to circumvent my wishes regarding the collection. If that occurs, I'm confident Olivia will find a way to restore balance. She understands something fundamental, that justice isn't about punishment, but restoration. When the time comes, she'll know what to do. Perhaps this crisis will be the catalyst they all need. Family legacies aren't built on possessions, but on the wisdom to navigate difficult truths with both firmness and compassion. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. All these years, I'd thought grandmother hadn't anticipated the family drama that would unfold after her death. Now I realized she hadn't just foreseen it. She had trusted me to handle it exactly as I had. Some inheritances, it seems, are written not in legal documents, but in the invisible bonds of understanding between kindred spirits. And some lessons are embedded within the very challenges that seem, at first, like painful betrayals. I placed the journal carefully in my bag, this final gift from a grandmother who had known me better than I knew myself.